Welcome to the Consultancy Edge. I'm your host, Matt Hodkinson, and today I speak with Danilo Kreimer from the Boutique Consulting Club. He works with early stage consultancies to help with their go to market strategy. And we spoke about the importance of personal branding in consulting, some of those considerations when going to market, building your own business development capability, including some of the pitfalls and that reliance on referrals that so many of us bear as a crutch. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Danilo Kreimer. Welcome to the Consultancy Edge, Danilo Kreimer. Hello.
Hello, Matt. Thanks for having me.
No
Excited
problem at
to the
all.
chat here.
Yeah, we've been connected for a while, of course. We've been swimming in the same circles, talking to boutique consultancies, and of course, you running the Boutique Consulting Club. And I want to sort of dive into some of your thinking when it comes to boutique consultancies and what's going on with them, because you often talk about, for example, and I resonate with this a lot, growing without relying on referrals. Why do
Mm.
so many boutique consultancies, do you think, get stuck in that cycle? And what's the first step to them sort of breaking free from that reliance on referrals?
Yeah, well, they get stuck in the cycle. First, because it works at the beginning. I think it's important to highlight that. So again, I'm working with early stage consultancies. So when you're starting out, if you want to have conversations about your service, the fastest and arguably best way to do that is by reaching out to your existing networks, existing relationships. That's the best way. It works to get the practice off the ground. Of course, over time, you understand that there's a lot of problems on simply relying on referrals. And the problems, I mean, anyone who runs their own firm knows about this. It's like unpredictable. You never know when you're getting a referral. One thing that it's very like overlooked also is the type of projects or the type of engagements that you get, because of course your network of relationships, your existing network, it's not homogeneous. So whatever you do, whatever your consultancy does, you have an ideal client profile.
Yeah,
You have some kind of organization that you're aiming to work with.
yeah,
Now, let's think it through. Your network, it's not composed only of people in those organizations, are people from different industries, different roles. So whenever you're talking to those people at the initial stages, when you're starting to grow, you start uncovering potential projects, potential engagements, but they're very different from each other,
yeah,
really. So, okay, maybe it's not my my specialty is something related to what I do, or it's in the periphery
yeah.
of my ICP, but it's not really standard.
And I guess, Danilo, in my experience, what a lot of people would have an understanding, their understanding of what you do, your proposition, but also have a somewhat of an understanding of who you work with. But it's rare that any referral partner is going to get all of that correct. So the
Mm.
quality of the referrals aren't always there as well, right?
Yeah, the quality of the referral, and of course, it all ties back to your capabilities. Um, if you know that referrals are going to be important for your firm, which they are for every firm, then you might as well ask yourself, okay, what do I need to have in place, systems, processes, to help me get the best out of them? So, okay, do I have a pitch deck or a message deck that I can share with people so they can better understand what kind of projects I'm after, what kind of people I want to connect with? Or do I have a process to ask specific referrals? Like, how do I ask for introductions? All of those things, I, the more organized structure you have, and there's a lot of best practice on this,
Mm.
better for the beginning. But of course, at some point, you're your existing network of relationships, it will exhaust.
Yeah.
So you need to start looking for other avenues, other go-to-market motions, let's say.
And what are those avenues, Dan? Because I know that you talk about getting away from referrals, or not getting away from them. They should always be there. Should always be the lifeblood of your business, of course. But if you're not relying, if you get to that point of being a consultancy that has their own pipeline generating systems that go beyond referrals, where where do they start? What would be your sort of next channel to focus on? What's the most sort of reliable way to get away from that reliance, do you think?
There are different go-to-market avenues for consultancy businesses. It will depend on your context, of course. What kind of offering, how's your positioning, who you're selling, what kind of engagement you're offering. But typically, the other avenues that we present or introduce to consultancy founders are inbound marketing,
Mm.
which includes creating content, thought leadership, um, outbound, which is very controversial, but there is ROI
Tricky
there.
for people to get the hang of that, isn't it? I mean, just
Yes.
reflecting on both of those, Dan, because I'm going to play the part of many of our listeners right now. I'm going to say
Yeah,
that my perception of inbound, as one of our listeners, might be that it's a long-term play. It's
correct.
and I guess that's why you also marry that with outbound. In your experience, is it that the best performing consultancies, are they doing a bit of both? Do they have inbound supported by outbound activity? How do you get that mix right, do you think?
Well, in terms of outbound, so just to be clear, I don't like to speak marketing jargon, but when we talk about outbound for consultancies, it's mostly ABM, account-based marketing.
Yeah.
So that's where we see uh, effectiveness for some consultancies. So you're really focusing on a specific set of accounts, specific set of organizations that you're very confident you could help, you're very confident you can serve, and then you start building those relationships. So again, it's very different from outbound, traditional outbound, let's say. But there are not only those two avenues. In fact, there are other avenues. Strategic partnerships
Mm-hmm.
are very important. So here, and there are many consultancies who experiment with that, um, where you're partnering with other consultancies or where you're partnering with service providers who can get you in front of your audience, basically. Um,
That is a tricky
the
thing to get right as well, isn't it, Dang? Because I've spoken with many consultancies who they try the partnership angle. They recognize the value that it has, potentially to bring. I guess one of the things that comes to the fore quite a lot with consultancy leaders that I speak with is that it tends to be quite lopsided. That you're never really going to be prioritizing any partners in what you're doing. They're not always going to be top of mind. What are some of the features of a successful strategic partnership, do you think? When does it work?
Yeah, and I think I heard from in an event from the Growth Consultancy Network
Yeah.
that you're 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 you
Ring a
work
big bell.
closely with them. I
Yeah.
think I heard from them a statistic that around 80% of the partnerships fail or something like this.
Yeah.
It's a huge number. Um, I think that there are best practices, and we have best practices. Uh, from what I see, it comes down to first understanding that you're going to have a lot of conversations, and there will be a very a small set of organizations or individuals who will be your super partners. So thinking quality rather than quantity of partners, it's important, or just understanding that, yeah, I will reach out to try to form partnerships, but at the end, it's mostly that the goal is not to increase the number of partners, but to find the right partners.
Yeah.
And those partners will then stick together for the long term and will grow together. I think that's the mindset. But where I see many consultancies, the partnerships go wrong, it's actually the small details, which is funny.
Yeah.
It's not the big, it's not the proposition, it's not the main plan, it's the small details. Things like, okay, if someone reach out, if I put you, if someone reach out to me and I want to put them in touch with you, or we want to do a project together, who's leading the project?
Mm.
Who's invoicing the client? Who's going to do? So all of those smaller questions,
Get the
which are
basics
really
right.
come down to the, yeah, it come down to the operational details.
Mm.
Who's going to be the client-facing guy? Um, all of these kind of create friction, and at the
Yeah.
end, uh, they reduce, they hurt what could be a good partnership
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. It makes it kind of pretty obvious why most of them fail, I guess, is they're not getting the basics right and
Mm,
having those fundamentals in place. It's just creates misunderstanding. But I
mm.
wanted to, if we go a little bit away from channel just for a second, I know that many boutique consultancies struggle with inconsistent revenue. I think that's pretty much a given in many businesses. What's the biggest misconception that you feel they have about going about stabilizing their pipeline, about removing those peaks and troughs, Dan? What have you seen working there?
The biggest misconception. Well, I think that the revenue inconsistency, or the feast and famine
Yeah.
a cycle, which we know so well, it comes from inconsistent marketing, really. And when you're, especially when you're in the early stages, you have no team to support, or a very small team to support, maybe you're one or two partners. You have to wear so many hats
Mm.
that uh, it gets difficult to manage your time. It comes back to time. When we look at research, and we also survey our clients, um, every time we're surveying our clients, when we're looking at this problem, why aren't we selling more, or why is your pipeline dry?
Mm.
Why is it not that healthy? Why do we have inconsistency? One of the things is time management. Like, founders say, I want to spend more time selling or doing marketing, but I don't. I can't. So it's partly a mindset problem. It's partly a time management problem.
Yeah. It's about getting busy
This
with delivery
is
sometimes and not, taking your eye off the marketing ball a little bit, right?
this is one.
Yeah.
The second thing is, in terms of revenue uh, inconsistency, or pipeline inconsistency, is the offering.
Mm.
Because of course, and we know that you need to consider. And I heard this analogy the other day. I can't remember the name of the guy, but I thought it was so good. Imagine that all you're eating from now on is cheeseburgers, and you're eating cheeseburgers for a whole year, 12 months of cheeseburger diet. What happens is your body and your life will adjust to that diet.
Mm.
So you will probably get in a not so good shape, but it will also impact your mindset, your psychological state, how you behave, how you feel, etc. It's the same thing for your consulting business. The kind of projects that you sell will shape the practice, which is something that we don't often think when you're starting out or on those initial stages. I had
Yeah.
a talk last week with another founder, It's a training consultancy, and his main offering was a short, kind of 2 week um, training offering, low price, very low price. What happened was the guy was completely stressed. He was not hitting goals, etc., etc. But so would I be stressed because he's selling a low price offering. He needs a huge number of clients. He needs a huge lead flow. He has no offering ladder, offering ecosystem. So he works with clients and he has nothing else to offer to them, not other ways to continue helping them. So he doesn't retain clients.
Mm.
So of course that will cause unpredictability, inconsistency in the business. So I urge consultancy founders to kind of look at the whole thing holistically. I think it's a more healthy way
Yeah.
to go.
And as we reflect on that angle of growth as well, Dan, I mean, you highlight that most consultancies don't need more leads, but what they actually need is better commercial habits. What are some of those habits that you think that consultancies really do need to implement and harness in their business?
Business development habits.
Yeah.
Uh, when we're talking about business development habits, so of course, the idea is to make action natural. When you say, okay, I don't have time to go to the gym, or I don't have time to eat, to prepare healthy food. Well, if you're a healthy person, like you don't think about it, just do it, right? That's the whole idea. So with habits, so business development habits, what we recommend basically is learning to manage your relationships, learning to manage your opportunities, and learning to manage yourself, your time and your calendar. These are the three buckets, let's say, that kind of I look at in terms of habits. So your relationships, you really need to nurture them. Of course, there's no way to go. Most of the people, they are out of the market, and the whole point in doing marketing is for you to become top of mind, right?
Yeah.
So the thing about nurturing relationships and why it's so important to turn this into a habit is there's no deadline. Like if we're looking at pipeline, for example, and managing opportunities should also be a habit. But if we're looking at pipeline, you open a CRM, there are leads, there are projects, there's a deadline there. I need to follow up that date. I need to deliver, send a proposal for X. And when we're looking at relationships, there's no deadline. If you think I want to catch up, I really need to catch up with Matt. If you if I do it today or tomorrow, it doesn't really change, right? Or if I do it next week, it does, and then and then you see where we're getting. So we're never doing it because there's no deadline. Our brain knows that. So kind of designing specific activities, habits, kind of as we do, like having a list of important people like in front of you that every week you're looking at this like really I need to connect. Like I need to connect. I'm looking. Okay, this week wasn't there, but every week I see the name there. Like this is an important relationship. This is an important person for the growth of my business.
Yeah, create the touch points with those centers of influence within your network. I think that's something we just definitely need that reminder of, Dan. Um, on your site as well, I wanted to talk about one of my sort of favorite subjects is positioning and specialization. On your site, you emphasize focusing on a small, well-defined market. We talk about niche quite a lot in the consultancy world, and I've got my own viewpoints on that. But what are your thoughts on how a consultancy should select a niche, and when how do they know if it's too narrow, too broad? How do you approach that side of things?
Uh, so I tend to follow. I tend to try to adopt the most objective position as possible. when we're doing positioning. So there are very few reliable indicators or numbers or statistics that we can turn to for identifying target market or targeting. I turn to David C. Baker research often, and he looks at consultancies, but also creative firms. And when he's trying to define that sweet spot where you're not overly narrow, hyper specialized, but you're not seen as a generic consultancy. And that point, he provides some benchmarks there. So, well, ideally, you want to find 10 to 20 competitors in the market, or ideally, you want to look at the organizations and whatever your targeting criteria is, there shouldn't be more than 4 or 5,000 organizations. And then, so there are a few numbers that we look at that, okay, if you're selling to tech companies, there are going to be 50,000 organizations in the market. That's a bit too broad. Maybe MarTech, maybe health tech, maybe so then
And look for the subcategories basically of those
we
overarching.
look for the subcategories. With that said, there's a lot of things that cannot be quantified.
Mm.
And you also as a marketer, like we constantly do jokes with the exercise of defining your ICP, and you're just listing whatever it is, like what's the newspaper that they read to and what they eat in the market and so on, and it's
Yeah,
ludicrous.
meaningless.
Yeah, but there are traits that you can look at when you're defining your targeting criteria that you should use to qualify your prospects, I think. So, for example, um, if you're helping consultancies, as it's the case on one of my clients, you're helping to perform quick turnarounds. One of his targeting criteria is, okay, I'm only working with organizations who have a light procurement department or no procurement at all. Like if there's procurement involved, I'm out. It's very difficult to put this into a positioning statement, but he knows that it's one of his lead qualification criteria.
And you can find that out, can't you? You know, behind the scenes. So long as
You,
you can kind of validate that information, that's the most important part.
yeah, you can find that out. But of course, at the beginning, it's a lot of test and trial.
Yeah.
It's also like you can find sub-segments inside the segment that you're inside the niche that you're serving.
Mm.
So for example, if I'm working with early stage consultancies doing under 500K a year, I could even say, right, but where am I really starting? I could take a like I could define a beachhead segment, let's say, which are okay, only consultancy founders who are ex-corporates. I'm starting from there. So that there are really a few ways to go.
There's a few good ideas there, Dan. One of the things I reflect on as well, beyond the sort of the sector niche and the subcategory niches as well, is the situational niche about better understanding. And I recommend any boutique consultancy do this. The situation that their ideal buyers are in. So regardless of what category they might reside in, what are the challenges they're facing day to day that align with the solutions that you can bring to market as well. And one of the other things that I know we talk about a lot, and I want to reflect on something I've spotted in amongst your content as well, is this idea of taking a strong stance, either for or against what you see in your sector as well. You refer to this as picking a fight. So I wondered how do you advise consultancies sort of pick that fight without alienating potential clients or being seen as just a bit problematic?
Yeah. I mean, you and I know that when we're trying to communicate with the market, crafting value propositions and so on, differentiation is an important element of it.
Yeah,
The way I look at least is resonance, differentiation, and the ability to substantiate, which is a John Doerr's definition.
yeah,
So this is really good. So resonance, what's in it for them, differentiation, what you're doing that others are not, and ability to substantiate is, can you walk the talk? Can you deliver on your marketing promises? So I think there are a few advisors or marketers who take this to an extreme that I feel like it's unhealthy. You really need to stand, like take an extreme anti-stance, extremely polarizing, because that's going to draw attention. I don't think that's the case for consultancies. Um, Differentiation happens in the mind of the of the client as well,
yeah,
of the prospect. So the way I see it, it's more about um, what's the what's the sacrifice? What are you willing not to do? What's the sacrifice that you're willing to make so that
interesting.
competition is not relevant anymore
Yeah,
for you? It's For me, differentiation is very tied to strategy, overall strategy. So when you're, it's not only a marketing exercise, it's a whole, it's a whole company exercise.
yeah,
So, right, what every marketing consultancy or what every IT consultancy or what every financial advisory firm is doing in the market? Well, there's a list of things that you can think of. Like everybody does that thing. Everybody creates dashboards. Every consultancy founder sells campaigns.
mm,
Every consultant or do retainers. Or okay, I'm not going to do that. At some point, for me, this is true differentiation. You need to understand everybody's doing. I'm not doing that because I see a path forward. I see
yeah.
that there is value to be delivered by doing something different. And then from there, uh, it, it will inform your messaging as well. So
Yeah.
why do we believe in that? What are the arguments? Why the industry is wrong? Why this approach is wrong? Why the best practice doesn't work for you? Or why there's a better way? It starts from a decision of, I'm not going to do what everybody else does, or I'm not going to think what everybody else thinks.
There's a couple of things baked into that, Dan. I mean, one of the things that I find is that first off, the consultancy was probably born out of that vision, about that realization that there is a better way, that something is broken, that something can be done from a different angle, from a different viewpoint. So quite often that's the brand story of the consultancy itself, where you find that stance, that strong kind of that position that you're taking. The other thing, of course, is that when you start to speak like that, it does jar with the rather vanilla, safe messaging that everybody else is putting out, right? So it's going to help you to stand out just by default.
Yeah, it's going to help you stand out by default. And the thing is, when people see a unique point of view or a differentiated
Yeah.
message, and they buy into the message, they're
Mm.
not buying, they didn't agree to hire you or to buy your services yet. But when they come to talk to you, they are bought into your point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a strong connection you make there. And while we're talking about that messaging, while we're talking about sort of content, I want to touch on what you were saying earlier about thought leadership and the sort of the inbound side of things as well. And and I mentioned at the time that our listeners might be thinking, well, that's a long-term play. We can create content. Of course, that's going to go on. We'll create our thought leadership. But for boutique consultancies that are looking for faster results, what do you think is the best way to make that content drive revenue opportunities, to get meetings, to get conversations started? What are you seeing is working right now? Thought leadership through to opportunity creation.
What is working right now are strategic consultations, workshops, um, and the reason for that is that you're showing how you work. You're not speaking about it.
Yeah.
This is very powerful when you're selling consultancy because it's an intangible service, credence good, and we all know that stuff. Very difficult for clients to visualize how you work, what you're going to deliver, etc. When you're putting yourself in front of them, talking about their situation, um, exploring some challenges or kind of bringing light to some challenges or opportunities that they didn't see before. This is very powerful. It puts you top of mind. It shows you how you work. It builds trust. So this is something that, like, if we needed to, if I had to choose, if I had to pick a way to accelerate, let's say, inbound results, would be just that. Like, put together, and there are so many ways to put to go here. You could create a strategy workshop where you're talking for 60, 90 minutes with a potential prospect, exploring some situations, some opportunities. You
Mm.
can talk about a new development in their industry, like there's a new regulation, there's a new technology. Let's talk about how this is going to impact your business.
Mhm.
Or you could um, you could create a small training. Again, 60 minutes. You're doing exercise, you're talking about their business, you're making them think about their business. And again, you're not giving free advice. This is important. You're not working for free. You're just educating, sharing light to some of the things you could work together on. And if they're interested, whenever they want to explore more, then they know what you do, they know how you work. I think this is one of the misconceptions that kind of get me so mad sometimes when I'm speaking to younger consultancy founders, is that they feel like they need to um, build an audience.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of value in an audience. Don't get me wrong. Uh, it will accelerate results. It will increase your visibility, reputation in the industry, etc. But I ask why? Why you need an audience? Well, because I want more leads, I want more clients, etc. Well, okay, there are other ways, faster, that can bring you those results.
Yeah.
And this means talking one-on-one. So instead of waiting for you to build an email list of 10,000 names or 20,000 names, sorry, you just approach organizations, directly approach people, offer value, share value, serve the industry. When you're having those conversations, again, you don't need a huge lead flow.
Yeah.
Typically, 50% of the firms of the early stage consultancies in the market, they are working with less than 5, 6 clients a year.
No, that's that. I mean, it's rarely a high volume thing, isn't it? We're not in a stack 'em high, sell 'em low kind of industry here. And for those of you who aren't watching this on YouTube and are listening to the podcast, Danilo's just had the sun has just come shining
Yeah.
through like a spotlight
Do
on
you
him.
mind if I close this?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Close the blinds. That might be useful. It makes for
Okay.
great audio. Listen, I want to touch on something around. There's a lot of hype around personal branding, Dan. What are your thoughts on personal branding? And I guess when we talk about the personal aspect, we're talking about the consultancy leaders or leader. Should they invest in it? Is it overrated? And I guess there's that ever present question: how then do you separate the individual if they are that sort of key person of influence, to quote Dan Priestley? uh, how do you kind of make that shift if you've built a personal brand from being an inextricable sort of cog in the wheel of the machine, so that later on, if you're trying to create a business of value, how do you separate yourself away? So just to distill that down, I've asked you a lot there. How do you value personal branding? Is it something that consultancy leaders should be focused on?
It's definitely something you should be focused on. I don't think you can separate um, in the early stages. When you're in the early stages of the consultancy, I don't think you can separate your personal brand with the business brand. And I mean, time after time, research after research, we see that people resonate more with people. So in terms of messaging, how you communicate channels, um, if you're speaking like you're hearing Dan or you're hearing Matt, it will resonate more than if you're hearing or following the page of TGO, you know?
Yeah,
So it resonates better with people. Uh, I I'm afraid I cannot add much in terms of how to make that leap to separate because I don't work often with consultancies doing more than 1 million a year, which
yeah,
is the point where kind of they start offloading a bit of the business development.
yeah. So at that
Um,
point, I guess it's more about building an asset-rich business that is a value in itself, rather than the value of the
yes.
personal brand. So that kind of makes sense. I get
Y-
that.
Yes, so I cannot speak more much about that
Yeah,
process or
yeah,
how to do it better, but I can assure you that in the early stages it's essential.
yeah,
And there's a lot of misconception when I think about brand, just because
mm,
marketers keep fighting about it,
yeah,
and founders get confused and confused the more they read. So for me, what I try to communicate, and again, it's a useful definition, useful way to look at brand for consultancy firms is your brand equals your reputation and your visibility.
yeah,
So if you're doing anything to improve those things, if you're doing something that will improve or build your reputation
yeah,
in your market, or you're doing something to improve or build your visibility in the market, then your brand will be stronger as a result.
yeah. I like
You're
that.
writing an article, you're doing a workshop,
Yeah,
even if you're having one-on-one conversations with the right people in the market, that will have an impact uh, on your reputation,
oh, Dorothy,
how you're
hosting a
seen.
podcast, for example. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a great
So
way.
that's brand. That's how you build a brand.
Exactly right.
Reputation and visibility.
Yeah.
I think this makes it lighter
And a
for
variation
founders
on
too.
that,
Yeah.
Dan. I've heard brand referred to as what other people say about you when you're not there, which I guess is it's a combination of what you're saying. It's that visibility because they're aware of you. You're in the conversation. You're remarkable enough to be, in their words, and the other aspect, that trust aspect, that credibility and reputation, as you call it. I mean, that's an essential part of that, isn't it? And maybe that builds into this next question I wanted to ask you, because I wanted to just say you've experienced obviously many consultancies in the startup phase and in the early stages. If you were launching a boutique consultancy today, what would you do? What would you do differently from the start? What would you make sure is one of the first things that you would put in place?
So for me, it would be um, avoid selling capability, try uh, and try to only look at outcome and desire outcome.
Yeah.
What clients are really looking for. Don't sell your don't sell whatever you do. Don't try to sell your expertise and sell results. Uh, I think other people might have talked about this here in the podcast, but it's so important when you're coming into the market, and I think it's part of the it's we kind of get into this mode because of the educational system and also how corporate works,
Yeah.
where okay, I'm the guy creating financial dashboards. So when you're launching your consultancy, you go to the market saying, I can create financial dashboards. Well, guess what? There's a gazillion people who are creating financial dashboards. So you're basically trying to convince people to get a financial dashboard, which is not the best way to go, you know? So I really try uh, to stimulate founders to think about what are the outcomes that they're delivering,
Mm.
what the outcomes that clients want. There's a, I don't know, there's a joke. I don't know if you know this one, Matt. Someone goes to a restaurant, tries to order, and the owner kicks the guy out. He said, "We're a pizzeria. We sell pizza. You want to order wine with it?" He gets kicked out because he wanted wine. Of course, it's a stupid joke. it's not it's not that funny. But the point is,
It was a polite
uh,
laugh, that one. Yeah.
what the client wants. Like if he's going to a restaurant, it's not just because he wants to eat pizza. Like he wants something to drink, he wants the service, he wants a nice atmosphere, whatever he wants. So if you don't produce the wine, I don't care. Partner with someone else, buy the wine and resell it, or I don't care what you do. But you need to deliver what they want. That's what
Yeah.
they want. They don't buy what they need. They buy what they want. The client buys what they want. So if you think that whatever you're doing, it's all they need, well, you will need to repackage the whole thing to include a lot of the things that he wants and then sneak in whatever he needs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we need to step out of the expert role and put ourselves more into the a place of the prospects. Just so many people still come into the market and trying to sell the time or
Yeah.
selling capability. It's not. It never worked. It's not going to work now. Even worse. It's. I mean, you will not survive. You will not
Yeah.
survive in the market.
No,
Yeah.
good point. Really good point. Dan, we've reached that point in the conversation where I ask about your snog, marry, avoid. So a reminder to our listeners: a snog is a quick win that you would advocate that the listeners implement in their consultancy today. The marry would be something for the long term, something you couldn't live without in your business, and an avoid is something to ditch as soon as is humanly possible. So let's start off with the snog. What's a quick win that you think the listeners could go away with based on your thinking?
So just because you asked me about referrals and why they're a problem, I'm going to talk about referrals. Because I mean the reality is 40 to 50% of your leads are coming from referrals. That's the reality. So let's not deny what the reality is.
Yeah.
And if it's a snog, like a quick win, here's an exercise that it's very, very, very easy to do, very quick to do. Get a piece of paper if you're listening, those who are listening, Matt's podcast. Get a piece of paper, divide it in three columns. First column, list 10 or 20 people that are influential in your career, mentors, clients, whatever it is. Second column, you write the name of whoever introduced you to those. people. And third column, you write the name of the people that you introduced to those people.
Interesting.
It's the find slash become the broker, the name of the exercise. Find slash become the broker. Uh, Once you do that, 5-10 minutes, take a look at the thing. Like there will probably be a pattern there.
Yeah.
Some names, like in the second column, will appear a lot of
Yeah.
times. Well, that's an important broker in your
Yeah.
network.
Interesting.
Reconnect right now.
Yeah. And if you've
And
got a blank third column, then that's quite a reflection on you as well. I think there might be a few gaps
yeah,
there.
it's time for you to kind of put some people in touch, to
Reciprocate.
reciprocate. So that's one exercise I recommend.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good snog. I like that. So,
Uh,
what about a marry then, Dan? What's something you absolutely couldn't live without in your business that you'd advocate for others?
a Mary would be so for early stage consultancies again.
Yeah,
uh, Most important tool by far, CRM. CRM. So a lot of people still don't have one. And I mean, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I have one, I bet with any listener, I would donate 100 quid to any donate. I mean, nonprofit organization of your choice. If I log into your CRM and I don't see like a forgotten follow up, like a missed opportunity, like there's so much. So and we did like an internal survey for like among our clients and partners.
mm,
It was something like 15% of the consultancy founders use their CRM daily. 15%. But those who did were 60 or 70% more likely to hit their goals,
wow.
marketing and sales goals. So, but that's the important part. It's not having the CRM, it's using it.
Yeah, it's
So,
classic. It's the classic. What gets measured gets managed, right? And that stays top of mind. It stays part of your focus. It's not. It's not any of this law of attraction. Put it out into the universe stuff. It's just because you're doing it. It works. It happens. I thought you were putting a risky bet out there, then, Dan. But I think yes, your money's safe for sure.
no,
Uh,
no.
okay, let's talk about the avoid. What would you ditch in your business? What do people need to get rid of as soon as possible?
um, I would get rid of one of the many things is and we talked about it. I think we touched it during this conversation is superficial goal setting. What I call superficial goal setting.
Yeah.
I had a founder reach out to me this week. He was starting to plan for the second quarter. So he said, okay, how do you like the most important number for me is sales growth, revenue.
Hmm.
How do I approach this? Like, how do I set the goal? Like, should I set like a 10% increase, a 20%? Like, what's the number?
Yeah.
Should I follow a benchmark? Should I kind of pick an ambitious goal that really drives me? And I used to kind of ask myself this same thing before, but then over time, I figure out that that's the wrong question to ask.
Hmm.
So you like most boutique consulting practices, firms should invert the order. So before you set the goal on how many sales you want, you focus on making the right sales,
Yeah.
which is that problem that we talked about. If you don't have an offering ecosystem that is designed for retaining clients, delighting clients, if your offerings are low priced, if they're not profitable, if you need a huge lead flow, that's going to be a problem. So no matter how many activity you put in, um, you will be making the wrong type of sales. no matter how many clients you bring in. It's the wrong kind of client. It's not profitable. It's not homogeneous. You are not improving on your delivery. You are not improving on your methodology. They are not sticking with you. By the way, 60-70% of your revenue needs to come from retainer or from existing clients. So that's it. Before you plan, look holistically, and that will give you better goals.
Fantastic. That's a good snog Marianne avoid there, Dan. Listen, we've come to the end. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. For those of you who are listening, especially the early stage consultancies out there, check out Danilo and the Boutique Consulting Club doing some fantastic things, implementing GTM strategies for those early stage consultancies. Dan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Matt. It was a pleasure, and good luck with the podcast. Great stuff.